I tell you that other one time was the time. You got it already.
Hello, welcome to Room B. I'm your host, Rumbii. I want to clarify something I mentioned in the last episode of the podcast. When I talk about the food differences between Canada and England, and I say that Canadian food here is not the best, I mean it in the sense of like affordable food, like things that are easy to access, easy to get. Because I do want to say that the healthy food here is great when it comes to spending a little bit more at the grocery store on your fruits and vegetables. It's great, but it's very pricey, very, very pricey compared to in England, where I felt as though accessing fruits and vegetables was a lot more attainable, especially for people who are not wealthy, people who don't have disposable income, people who are living paycheck to paycheck. It's pricey. And I just wanted to clarify that because it does sound like sometimes I rag on Canada and it may come across as though I'm not enjoying my time here. I really am. And you know what? It's very interesting because I never knew that this was something that people who just relocate experience. It was only until my experiences that's when I was like, oh, that's why that's happening. Because when my husband was in England, he spent 5 years in England. And his first couple years, he used to always complain. Like he would always say stuff like, oh, we don't have this back in Canada. And I would always be like, why do you always compare? Like, why are you constantly comparing? And it's like, I didn't understand it at the time why he would do that, but now I get it because I've experienced it myself now. There's just something about the things that you're used to, your comforts, and then them suddenly going. It's very disorienting. And whenever you meet something or you come across something that isn't done the way that you expect it to, you kind of feel the need to say something about it. Like, oh my gosh, this is not what I'm used to. So, Dean, I know you're listening to this. I get it now. I'm sorry for all the times that I always like, stop comparing. Like, I remember one time I was like, dude, you're in England. Like, you're in a different country. Like, why do you expect things to be the way they were in Canada? And it's like, now I get it. Now that I don't have my comforts and things that I'm used to, I'm feeling it. I'm getting it now. I also wanted to add to my discussion about how I use the internet because I spoke a lot about being a consumer of the internet and like a lurker a lot. And I don't think that's me anymore. I mean, I still am that person. I still lurk and like if I'm on the internet for pleasure, I'm still that person, but I'm also a creator now, right? I'm now creating content. So I feel like that that's like something that's very new for me because it's really only been like 3 years of me actually actively putting things out outside of like, social media like everybody else has. But I mean, as in like making YouTube videos and making this podcast. So it's a very interesting space to be because I'm also not like, I'm not a massive creator. I don't have like a big following. I am at that point where it's like, it's probably the hardest part of it because you don't really get any feedback. A lot of the feedback you get is from the people who care about you, the people who really know you and want to support what you do. And so, like, that's very skewed information because these are the people that care about you. So they're going to love everything that you do. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't appreciate that. Oh my gosh, I 100% appreciate it. Like, I am so lucky to have family and friends who enjoy what I make. It honestly fills my heart because I know there are other creators out there whose family and friends don't really understand what it is they're doing or don't really have the time or patience or care to watch that type of content. So I'm very, very grateful for that. But my point is, because outside of those people, I don't really have much feedback from, I guess, strangers or random people who seek me out. So it's like, I feel like maybe this is the hardest part of content creation, because it's very easy to like get discouraged and think, well, I keep putting my work out and no, I'm not really getting anything back. But I think part of the journey is that weird uncertainty. And at the same time, I am like living my best life. I am so happy with where I'm at. I have 240 subscribers on YouTube. And oh my gosh, I am so happy. Like, I just, dude, you know how many, can you get 240 people in a room? Can you get 240 people interested in something that you do? Like, that's a lot of people. Like, if I was a musician and 240 people turned up to my show, like, we're lit. Like, it's a vibe. I'm very happy with that. Of course, it'll be nice to get more people, more eyes on the stuff that I do, because I think I'm hilarious and everyone should be watching everything that I make. But I'm still just so happy that there are those select few people who find me and are willing to watch the stuff that I make. It makes me feel good, especially as someone who doesn't feel good a lot of the time. It's nice to know that something that I'm creating is being received well, even if it's not by many people. I appreciate every single person who watches my stuff and listens to this podcast. So I recently started watching Atlanta, the TV show, and honestly, I love it. It's great. I know I'm very late. The show is already done. I think there's 4 seasons. But there's something, okay, let me explain to you why I didn't watch it while it was on. I am the type of person that gets put off by like hype. So, you know, when everyone's like, you should do this, you should watch this, you should go see this, or you should wear this, or you should, you know, basically hype over things, it really puts me off. Like, it turns me completely off when everyone is obsessed with something. As a result, it means that I'm always late to things. And I don't mind it. I honestly don't mind it because, like I said before, I like to make my own decision. And I feel like we get really caught up in the hysteria of like following trends and following the hype. And yes, it's all fun and games to be in and to feel involved. I don't know how to explain it. I've always been that kind of person. Even when I was younger, when people would say, let's go to this place, or let's go do this, or let's wear these clothes or these shoes, I wasn't interested because it's like, I've always been that kind of person that always questions things for myself. And I have to ask myself, like, are you just doing this because it's fun and exciting and it's what everybody else is doing? Or you actually like this thing? And I feel like when there's hype around things, it's a bit difficult to realize or to discern between the two, whether it's just hype or you actually are interested in this thing. There definitely have been things that I've joined into the hype for. Like, let's say, for example, since I'm talking about TV shows, when Swarm was on, I could not avoid the spoilers. So I just started watching it anyway. And I enjoyed it. I had fun. I really liked it. So there definitely have been situations where I have been part of the hype. But for the most part, I'm just, I just, sometimes it's specific things, I guess, but I just get turned off. I get turned off and I don't want to watch it. Anyway, me watching Atlanta, there's a character called Vanessa. She's played by the beautiful Zazie Beetz. And she asks, are Black women considered brunettes? And you know what? That sent me reeling because I was like, are we? Like, am I a brunette? Because I never considered myself one, right? And like when you hear those classifications of hair colors, it's usually pertaining to Caucasian people. I feel like those, the redheads, the blondes, the brunettes, it's always Caucasian people. So I was like, wait, does that mean that I am? And I feel like that is in the same realm of like describing men as tall, dark, and handsome. Because when I first read the term tall, dark, and handsome, I thought they were describing a black man. I'm not kidding you. It's only when I started seeing it out in the world and the older I got and I started exploring more, speaking to different people, watching different kinds of media, I was like, oh, tall, dark, and handsome is a white man. So it's like, yeah, I had to do some research. I was scouring the internet trying to figure out. There were very polarizing viewpoints, but I think for the most part, everyone agrees that black women are brunettes. So I'm gonna start describing myself as that. I'm a brunette. And it's interesting because I have always understood that you do have blondes who are black and redheads who are black. Like you have blondes from the Solomon Islands, like a lot of black people from that region have blonde hair naturally. And from my region of the world, where I'm from Zimbabwe, but that southern region of Africa, there are naturally redheaded black people in that region. And I grew up with people like that. So I don't know why I'd never put two and two together and thought, well, if you have black people who are blonde and black people who are redheads, why can you not be a brunette? But I guess that goes to show as well, like the Eurocentric view of these words, these terms that are used to describe phenotypical features. As you know, I am an advocate for therapy. I try to get as many people as I know into therapy. I myself have been in therapy many times. I've had many therapists in my time, but I haven't been to therapy in a very long time. I think it's going to be almost a year soon. And at the time, I stopped therapy because the last session I had with my therapist, it really didn't go that well. Well, it didn't go well for me. I'm sure she's probably confused, like, why has this girl ghosted me? But for me, it didn't go well. I didn't get what I wanted from it. And at the time, I needed some support with a fear I had. I was anxious about something that was coming up. And my therapist kind of told me to like, okay, I don't want to go into too much detail because that's personal. It's very personal. And I don't need to talk about it on here. But it was a situation where I was concerned about a specific relationship I have with someone, and that person wasn't very willing to understand my side of things, understand my perspective. So I was asking my therapist, like, how should I go about talking to this person in order for them to understand me a little bit better? And my therapist just kind of said, like, oh, just let it go. Just let it go. And at the time I didn't like that because I wanted some resolution. Now that the situation already occurred and it worked out, it actually did work out. Just letting it go worked out. She was right. But because of how I felt in that session, I just stopped going because I wanted her to say something and she didn't say that. And it's not fair on her. 100%, it's totally not fair on her. I take the blame for that. I take the blame for this ghosting that I've done. But at the same time, with all this time that I've taken off therapy, I haven't felt the need to go to therapy because I feel like I've managed to therapize almost every single aspect of my life except for my marriage. I think maybe I'm ready for couples therapy instead of individual therapy because, dude, I spent 10 years doing therapy for me, trying to understand me, trying to get what's going on, understand my illnesses, understand my brain, understand how I cope with things, my relationships with friends, with family, partners. I did therapy for all of that, except for my relationship with my partner. It's not that there's anything like any big issues that I want to tackle so that we're in a bad space. No, not at all. But I just feel like as someone who loves therapy, I owe it to myself to enter that stage of therapy. Couples therapy would be good for me because, I really want to share stuff about my marriage with you guys, but I don't feel like I've done enough therapy pertaining to my marriage for me to be able to like talk about it yet, because our relationship is, our marriage is quite recent, but we've been together almost 10 years now. And I want us to evolve. I want us to not just be in the same relationship that we started with because we are growing older together, right? We've already grown so much together. The needs that we have now are completely different to the needs that we had at the beginning. And there's also nothing wrong with deepening our intimacy and our connection, And I think the best way to navigate those changes is with a therapist, with someone who is, a common ground for the both of us, but also an uninvolved party, someone who has the ability to speak from the outside without judgment and with professional knowledge. And I think also what would be most important would be to have a therapist and have the habit of doing couples therapy for when times get tough, because they are going to get tough. We are going to go through some tough periods, some hard periods. And I think even the great parts as well need to be discussed in therapy so that we can also appreciate those good moments too. And I also think that it will be helpful for just our individual evolution too. Like I said, I feel like I've therapized almost every single part of my life except for my marriage. And it's one of the most important things to me. So I would love to get to that point where both my husband and I are ready to discuss our marriage outside of just him and myself, or with friends or with family. And I don't really think like I've spoken to anyone about marriage, because at the same time I also don't feel like we are equipped enough to be ready to just talk about marriage, because like I feel like we're still in the early stages, we're still learning, we're still understanding what this dynamic is. But I'd like to think that we're doing well. I'd like to think that we're in a good place. I never understood those people who say that marriage is hard, because I feel like if it's hard, then you're making it hard. Maybe I might regret saying this, but the way I see it is things can only be hard if you are not being honest or realistic. And I think that's one of my husband and I's core values. Like, we do our best to be honest with each other. And we are also very realistic. And I know people want different things from marriages. And for me, it's that friendship. Like, I feel like him and I, we were friends before anything. And I feel like we still are friends. And I understand that some people might feel as though like a partner should just be a partner. They shouldn't be a friend. They're there to serve a need. And I get that. But that's not what I want. And I don't think that's what Dean wanted either. So for us, it's like the most important thing for us was our friendship, because when life does get hard, when life gets real and you have to deal with some scary stuff, at least we can understand that we've promised each other that whatever happens, we deal with things as friends first. Because once you take away that partnership of a relationship or wife and husband, I feel like that comes with a lot of expectations, those titles. Whereas, like, if we're just friends, then at least, like, if we're disagreeing or we are emotional about things, we can understand that this is my friend and my friend wants the best for me, or I want the best for my friend. Maybe that's the stuff I can talk about on here, the stuff that has helped us get to where we are, to having been together this long and, still feeling good, still feeling great about the choice that we made to be with each other. Because again, that's what marriage is, right? It's a daily choice. You're choosing every single day to remain with this person. And like I said before, to me, the most important thing in love is peace. And Dean definitely gives that to me. And I do my best to ensure that he also has that peace, because he's a teacher. So his job is very stressful. And his job also doesn't have this line of demarcation where it's like work finishes and you leave it at that and you can go home and do whatever you want. It doesn't work that way as a teacher. Your work comes home with you and you're working through the evening and you're working through the weekends. So, yes, you can say you've clocked out, but you're still working more hours than you're actually being paid for. So, I try my best to ensure that the moment he gets home, he's welcomed into peace and comfort, because at the end of the day, that's all we can do for each other. On the other hand, Dean has never been to therapy. And I have to say, I've been very judgmental about that. Like, I'm just being honest. I was very judgmental, and I've tried in the past telling him, like, dude, you really should go to therapy, but he doesn't feel the need for it. He doesn't feel as though he needs to go, and he's not ready to go. So, you can't force someone if they're not ready. And that's something that I had to come to, like, the realization of. I could say it as much as I want, tell him to go to therapy, suggest that he goes to therapy, but if he doesn't want to go, he won't go. And I'm totally fine with that now. And I actually really respect him for sticking to his guns, because he set his boundary and he made it known, and he reaffirmed it each time I tried to push it. And so I am honestly very impressed by his ability to boundary set and continuously reassert that boundary, because I was definitely crossing the boundary by, again, mentioning it. You should go to therapy. Don't you think you need therapy? And it's like, just because I feel a certain way about it doesn't mean that he's going to feel the same way about it as well. And also, like, I don't know. Like, it's not my place. At the end of the day, it's not my place. Yes, I'm his wife. Yes, I want the best for him. Yes, I want him to feel supported in other ways. But at the end of the day, if someone doesn't want to do something, they're not going to do it, no matter how many times you tell them. And so I can definitely own up to me being very pushy at some point, but I've let it go now. And so at the same time, I think maybe that's why I haven't really pushed doing couples therapy, because if he's not ready, then what's the point, you know? And maybe I need to do my own marriage counseling. Maybe that's what it is. Who knows? I'm just thinking on the fly right now. Like, I'm just really trying to think, is this really the reason why I haven't been to therapy? Or am I just using this as an excuse? I'm just trying to work through it, because it's very surprising to me. I'm very surprised by how long I've gone without therapy. In the past, I've gone longer times, but that's because I had no choice. I had no access to therapy. I wasn't able to find a therapist. But now I'm choosing not to go to therapy. So maybe I need to write a little bit more about it. Who knows? Because writing always helps. It really does. Like, that's like my favorite thing to do, my favorite way to work through issues, work through thoughts. But we'll see. We will see. That's all I really want to talk about today. Thanks so much for listening. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to my podcast. And I'd like to remind you to please rate and like my podcast, depending on whatever platform it is that you listen to this on. It would mean a lot to me because then it lets other people know that this is a good podcast and you enjoy it. And it also just lets me know that there are people out there who appreciate this, who enjoy this. And it will give me a nice little bit of motivation to continue and to share more. And if you really do like the podcast a lot, tell your friends, tell your family, share it with other people around you. Let them know that this is a nice little space for us to just chill and hang out and talk about things that are happening in this life of ours. Also follow my Instagram for this podcast. It's at Rumbii Pod. Rumbii, just like the podcast name, and POD pod afterwards, all one word. I post reels from the episodes. I'd really love to get some engagement there. Comment if you want to DM me any questions. I'd really appreciate that. I'm hoping that once I have a little bit of a following on there, that's where I'll do my questions that I can then bring onto the podcast. I'd really love to have a segment where I read you guys' questions and just try and give my 2 cents, my opinion, my advice. I'm here for a while. I want to make this podcast a permanent thing. I want us to build a community. I want us to connect. That's the whole point of this. I want to have guests from all different walks of life just to weigh in on these things that are on my mind. And also, once we have that segment where I answer everybody's questions, it would be nice to also get guests' opinions on these questions. I just want to create a community. That's all I'm looking for. I moved halfway across the world. Not much family here, not many friends. So I'm trying to create my own little community over here. And I would really appreciate you guys sharing this podcast. With that said, I hope that you stay awesome, be kind, and spread positivity.
Rumbii's podcast. Rumbii's podcast. Yeah. Rumbii's podcast. What? Rumbii's podcast. Rumbii's podcast. This is Rumbii's podcast. What? Rumbii's podcast. Yeah. Rumbii's podcast. Oh yeah.
I tell you that little one time was the time. You got it already.